In section 3.3, we will talk about data. What are we going to talk about? We will talk about the different types of data. We will talk about how to classify the data. We'll talk about some general considerations, and finally, how to secure data. So, what is data? Data is information that can be processed and analyzed. Pictures, spreadsheets, documents, videos, etc. Now, data classification is categorizing data based on the sensitivity and importance to the organization. And this helps to apply appropriate security measures to protect the data. So you want to be able to apply the proper security measures to protect the data. Now, before you classify data, it's important to know the type of data that you have. So let's take a look at the different types of data and then how to classify them. First, you have regulated data. What is regulated data? This is data that's subject to compliance requirements and regulations, and it requires security measures to avoid fines. So if you don't want to avoid fines, for example, you have personal data. In the European Union, they're very strong and strict about that. Personal data is protected under GDPR. GDPR is a policy in the European Union that ensures that data processors and organizations that process user data should protect the data and should warn the user in case of a data breach. You have trade secret. What is a trade secret? This is secret information that holds economic value and that is not publicly known. For example, formulas or practices, like the recipe for Coca-Cola, it's a famous trade secret. It's hidden, it should not be known, and it's only known to a very select group of people within an organization. I personally know the formula for Coca-Cola, but I'm not going to share that with you guys. Intellectual property, or IP. So this is a creation of the mind, and this should be legally protected. And this involves intellectual assets, proprietary processes, inventions, R&D data, research and development. So these are creations of the mind, and that should be protected. Legal information, legal matters, case files, contracts. This requires confidentiality. Any legal documents outlining some terms and conditions. Sometimes the courts ask you to keep those private. They should be private and confidential. Financial data. Financial data is related to the organization's financial statements. You have bank accounts, balance sheets, tax information, and all kinds of financial information. Human and non-readable data. These are easily interpreted by humans for human readable data, like text documents, like spreadsheets, images, videos. These are data that you and I can easily interpret. Non-human readable are intended to be processed by computers, by machines, for example, encrypted data or binary files or different kinds of data that humans cannot interpret. Now, these are some different types of data. So we covered the different types of data. Now let's classify the data. To classify data, you can have public data. Well, this public data, this is data intended for public disclosure. It doesn't require protection. It doesn't pose any risk to the organization. For example, when you go to a website homepage, you see the home screen. You can navigate on the about page, about us, contact us. That's text, that's data public. It's intended for public use, for public disclosure, doesn't require any security. It doesn't pose any security risk. You have restricted data. Restricted data is sensitive and its access is tightly controlled. Disclosure could have consequences. For example, details about the power grid system or transportation system for the government. These can have high security risk because if someone not intended takes access or gains access, it can cause severe damage. Confidential data. Confidential data is secret and only accessible to authorized individuals. Access should be limited to those with the need to know. So these includes like trade secrets, like we talk about the Coca-Cola formula, business plans, patents. These are confidential, secret, and only accessible by authorized individuals. Access should be limited to those with the need to know. So it should only be given out like that, but you need to have a need to know access to view the data. Sensitive data. Sensitive data is data that, if disclosed, can cause harm to an organization or to an individual. For example, social security numbers, credit card numbers, addresses, very sensitive, can cause harm to a person or to an organization, and should be kept private. Private data, this is related to an individual and is intended to remain private. Disclosure could infringe on personal privacy, and this includes medical records, this includes emails, personal messages. So this should be kept private. Critical data is essential to an operation and survival of an organization. Compromise could result in business failure. For example, manufacturing processes, the supply chain information, that is critical. If there is a failure in the industrial system you see there, that can cause an entire failure and can even lead to a business failure, depending on the magnitude of the failure. So this is critical and it's essential to operations, to day-to-day operations, and to the organization's survival. Now, data can be in different forms. Data can be in different states. You have data in transit, at rest, and in use. What does that mean? Data at rest is data that is not actively traveling between devices or networks, and it's not even used at all. So it's stored somewhere, like in a hard drive, like in a computer, and it is kept and preserved. It is not risky. It is in a database, it's in the hard drives, in the computer, it's in the cloud. It is not actively used. It is at rest, just like the name says. Data in transit is data that is actively moving from one location to another. So it's traversing one computer or server to another, like emails, like instant messaging, like file transfer, like downloads. During that process, sending an email from one computer to another, given the accessibility over the internet or private business networks, as it travels from one location to another, this data is usually less secure than data at rest. And there is a way to secure them, for example, with SSL TLS that we saw in the previous section, or VPNs. Data in use is data that is actively processed by a computer or an application. This is data in its most vulnerable stage. So it's currently being used, being processed, whether it's being read, updated, it's immediately available, it's immediately used, and it's exposed to an attack. It's exposed to attacks by cyber criminals. And here, encryption, it's usually critical, because if you want to use the data, if it's encrypted, you will not be able to use. So this is data in its least secure state.
All right, guys, was that interesting? Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Trust me, you will not regret it. Also follow us on our various social media platforms, including Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, and more, to be the first to know about the awesome content that we're prepping for you guys. Thank you for your attention. Hope to see you on the other side.